And it's very beautiful. You see, God has not forbidden, has not withheld from us all the pleasures of the world. You must not think that Baha'u'llah has come to stop us having pleasure. All the pleasures of this world, you can enjoy it, and it is for you, but you have to do it in the right way. Baha'u'llah mentions the idea of detachment is not to become a poor man and a mendicant or live an ascetic life. You can, he said, have all the good things of this world. He said, in fact, all the good things of this world, in one of his tablets he mentions, all the good things of this world is created for the loved ones of God. It's all created for you. But he says, do not become attached to them. Do not make them to rule you, to rule over you. But you can have them. He says, if you can eat in vessels of gold, eat in vessels of gold. But don't become attached to them. Don't let them become your master. So you see, the idea of detachment is so different from what people think. When you say detach yourself from the things of this world, some people think now this means you have to become careless, you have to give up the world. And this is against the teachings of Baha'u'llah. He has never told us to desert the world. He says, in fact, he says, engage yourself in all the work and the professions. And he says, your work is service. Your work is worship of God when you are working. So you see that how much the view of detachment is different from what we understand it. Now that I'm talking about detachment, let me go a little bit further about this, because this is a subject which we often talk about. We often talk about this. In the writings you hear more and all the time telling us that you have to be detached from the things of this world. To be detached does not mean, as I said, to become careless, to give up the world and become poor. In fact, sometimes poor people are much more attached to the world than rich people. You know, sometimes poor people are much more attached to the rich than the rich people. There is a story in Persian of a king and a dervish. Maybe you have heard that story. It's a Persian story. And the king and a dervish, the dervishes are supposed to be, they're supposed to be renounced. They have renounced the world and they are detached, and in fact they have nothing. And they have really, that's one thing, they have nothing. And they go around and they have got a little basket. And they carry this basket around with them so that as they go around, people would just put a little bit of food in these baskets for them. And they sleep anywhere that they come across. You see how much this is against the teachings of the faith? Although they think this is detachment. This is very much against the teachings of the faith to do this. Anyhow, it was supposed to be, this man was supposed to be so detached from the things of this world that the king became very fond of this idea. And he invited this dervish to his palace. And then they stayed together for some time there, and he taught them a lot of lessons about detachment. And the king became very, very much of a convert to this idea. And he said, well, I'll become like you. And so the king disguised himself in the garb of a dervish, left the palace, and they both of them left the palace and went on wandering. You know, just this is what they do. They wander around. And after a mile they're gone, suddenly the dervish, in horror, he found out that he has left behind his basket in the palace of the king. And he said, oh, this is terrible. We have to go back and get our basket. I can't go without it. The king said to him, I have left behind my palaces. And you are attached to your little miserable basket, you see? Which is true. Now you see, really, detachment has nothing to do with riches or with poverty. Although Baha'u'llah says, And so in other religions, that if you are a very rich man, it's difficult to be detached. But if you become detached when you are in a position of wealth and other things, then your station is very high indeed. But really, detachment, again, I think I was mentioning it some time ago to the friends here. One evening we were together, and I mentioned the meaning of detachment as far as I understand it. I'll repeat it for you here. You know, every person, all of us, by nature, we are very possessive people. By nature, man is possessive. We want to possess things. We want to own things. We want to own our own things. And as you go around, you go and always add things to your collections. We are collectors. You have a house, you have a business, you have money, you want to add to it. You go out, you find something beautiful, a beautiful painting, you add to it. This is your collections. You bring it home. And we gather these things all around us. This is true, really and truly. I suppose if somebody looks down upon us from the spiritual worlds of God, who have passed from this state of attachment, they will be amazed how we are gathered things around us, you know. It's like these little creatures who store their food, you know, and they are protecting it with their lives. We are really very queer people. This is the way man is. This is the way God has created us. What can you do? This is the animal in us. We are possessive. And we are the master in this. You know, the master always stands in the middle, and all our things revolve around us. We are the most important thing. And everything revolves around it. Everything beautiful you buy, you add to your collections. Until one day, you come across the faith. And you say, this is a very beautiful thing. This is the most beautiful thing I've got. And then you add it to your collections. Yes, you are in the middle, and all the things revolve around you, your house, your business, your family, your possessions, and your faith. You see? You have an hour for your hobbies, you have an hour for your family, you have so many hours for your work, and you have an hour for the faith. Well, such a man is attached to the things of this world. He is not detached. You see? He's not detached. He is attached. Because he pays the same attention to his house, or much more maybe, than to his faith. But if you put the faith in the middle of your life as a pivot, as an axis of our life, and then we and our possessions revolve around it, then you are detached. You still can keep your possessions. But the faith is first in your life. This is really a practical way of knowing what is attachment and what is detachment. And so that when the challenge comes to us, and always challenges come to the Baha'is, to arise and serve the faith. When the challenge comes to us, then we know what to give, how much of our possessions to give, how much of our time to give. And you will give all your time if necessary, because the faith is first in your life. And if I want to move my home and go to some other town, I'll find out whether the faith is going to benefit from it, or whether the faith is going to be harmed by it. And then I'll do according to what the faith needs. This is really a criterion for finding out whether one is attached or one is not attached to the things of this world. And I will mention one form of attachment, which is the most formidable and the most harmful and the most difficult maybe. It is not attachment to things. It is attachment to our own self. The ego. Attachment to our own self. This is the most dangerous form, and it will take probably a lifetime to get rid of it. A lifetime. It needs spiritual battles that we have to fight always within us. to subdue the self. The self is the greatest enemy we have. And I don't want you to mix up the self of man with the soul. The self is what is the animal self. Is the force within us which drives us towards animal nature. That is the self. And we have to always be in a position to have a rein on that dangerous animal. And whenever it raises its head, just put it back in its place. This is where we have to be always in control. I'll give you an example of what I mean by this, our own self. I'll give you an example of this. And I will give you an example of one of those, the local spiritual assemblies are places where we are all tested when we go into it. And when we sit there, we will be tested. That's a marvelous testing arena for Baha'is. We are tested all the time, perhaps, and we are not aware of it. Now, I'll give you an example of what self means. An attachment to self means we become attached to our opinions. I love my opinion. It's my views. It is my views. It's very important, And I give my views. And if it is not accepted, I'll be upset. And if it is accepted, I'll be delighted. And I will go around and say, this was my idea, I was mentioning yesterday, the word I and my is really a very ugly thing in the faith, in life. This is my idea. But really, a person who is selfless is a person who gives his ideas and he forgets about it. Really forgets about it now. Not to just say outwardly forget about it, but really. And so that if your idea was put forward, and if they said, what a marvelous idea it is, we are going to write to the House of Justice and say this person's ideas have been so marvelous that I don't feel, oh, great, now I'm elated and I'm exalted. This is my idea. Now, as soon as you think in your heart, that way, be sure we are attached to our own self. This is the attachment to our own self. One example of it. Or if they came back and said, this was a terrible idea. This man's ideas is horrible. Every time he comes, he gives us terrible ideas. Okay. One should not be affected by it. You just have given your ideas, you forget about it. Because in this faith, now nobody is telling us that we should suppress our views. I'm not saying that. In a local assembly, we have to give our views frankly, and if you found that your friends did not understand you, you have to give them another explanation of it and explain to them. But once you give it in, once you give your ideas, it's no longer yours. You have to forget it. This is selflessness. Now, this was just an example of what self is. This I is the self. And in this faith, Baha'u'llah, in this day and age, has removed from us, from our midst, anything which would compel people or make people to become, to have a position so that they will become, they will go around and throw their weight around, as they say. There is no such a thing in the faith. This is one of the great bounties of God, that Baha'u'llah has completely eradicated the idea of personalities. The great station that we have, as I said yesterday, really is that of servitude. A real servant is very great and beautiful. A real servant is the most beautiful thing, the most exalted thing we can do. And a real servant will never want him to be exalted. As soon as you get him exalted, it's not nice. And I think that we have to learn these things as time goes on from the writings. I mentioned that yesterday. I'm not going to repeat it. And here we come to another one of those teachings of Baha'u'llah, which not until we carry it out can we do anything proper, and that is to love one another. To love one another. Now you see, you cannot force yourself to love somebody, can you? And it's no good to do that either. It's the worst thing. It's a bad thing to do. It's better not to do it if it is artificial. I know, we all understand this. Love must come from the heart. But it is easy to love people you like. It's not easy to love people you don't like. And we must also be practical. In all these communities, there are people who do something to you which you don't respond positively to. You feel irritated sometimes, maybe. I don't know. And that is why we come to dislike people. I'm talking to you frankly. Now, how can we love that person that you dislike or you don't like so much? And not until we are able to love him can we do anything in this life, in this faith. Nothing. You read the writings all day, you say your prayers every day, you carry out all the teachings of Baha'u'llah, but if you don't love the friends with all your heart, you don't love each other, then things will not go forward. We become frustrated, we become unhappy, even though I read the writings every day. Now, I must make a note of some of these things that comes to my mind. Now, I will tell you an incident which happened to me some years ago, and that might explain what I'm trying to say. Some years ago, I was walking in a very crowded street in London. Very crowded. Thousands of people pass you every minute. And these people don't mean much to you because you don't even take notice of them, as if they are not there. And then suddenly, I noticed across the road on the other side of the street, there was a man who used to come to our firesides years before. He was not a Baha'i, but he used to come to our firesides. And as soon as I saw that man, my heart jumped for him. And I said to myself, look at this crowd. None of them probably know about Baha'u'llah, but that man has heard the name of Baha'u'llah, and this is marvelous. It's the distinction. I could see the distinction. He has heard the name of Baha'u'llah many a times. He is distinguished in my sight from the rest of them who haven't heard it. To hear the name of Baha'u'llah is a great privilege, a great distinction. You see now? Now, how much more is the position of a person who says, I am a Baha'i? Can you see the station of this person? Forget about his doings. Forget about all the things he does which run against your grain and upset you. But look at what he has. He is a Baha'i. Now, when I say he is a Baha'i, what does it mean really? I can only talk about myself. Do you know really and truly, and I mean this, I cannot say I am a Baha'i except I'm related to him by name. It's just a name. It's just that I'm attached myself to his name. I cannot say I am a Baha'i, truly. Impossible to say that. But by name, I am attached to him. And that is a distinction. Who cares what I do and what my life is? Who is not perfect? Who is perfect? We all have our shortcomings. But this person has a trace of Baha'u'llah in him, just a name. And that is a great distinction. You compare him with the rest of mankind, he stands far above it. Now look into his face in that way. Don't look at his problems and shortcomings that you might see, because you look into his face and see a trace of Baha'u'llah, and then you love him. I can assure you, you will love him because of Baha'u'llah, because of his attachment by name to him. And then you can embrace him without even knowing what his name is. Then you will never see the wrong things. And as soon as something happened that you disliked, you remember that. We are all full of shortcomings. This is a very important principle, really. And this is the meaning of humility. This is the meaning of servitude. Meaning of servitude is not to come in and bow before each other. But the meaning of servitude is to look into each other's faces and see a trace of Baha'u'llah. And then you love that person. And you become united with him. And then we have a sin-covering eye. I don't want to see the bad things. No, you don't want to see the bad things in me. Don't see it that way. And if, of course, somebody does something which harms the faith through his actions, which brings disgrace upon the faith, then it is our function to inform the institutions of the faith and say, look here, this person is doing something which is very bad. And then it is for the institutions of the faith to help him to overcome his problems. And if he didn't, well, they might even say to him, you can't remain in the faith. Okay, that is not for me to do that. But as an individual, we have to have a sin-covering eye and to see in every face a trace of Baha'u'llah. There definitely is. And that's what makes every person so beautiful, really. It's that which makes every person so beautiful and so distinguished. You read the writings and see what the station he has destined for a true believer. Someone who is attached by name in the sight of God. You remember what Christ said? He said, when the man came to him, his disciples, and said to him, my father is dead, can I go and bury him? He said, leave the dead to bury their dead. Means all the people in his sight who had not faith were dead. Now this is not in any way to indicate that we have to look down upon people, far from it. And go out and say, oh, you're dead, you're no good. No, far from it. When you become a Baha'i, you realize all your shortcomings. I will recognize my own shortcomings. As soon as you become a Baha'i, you can find out you're full of shortcomings. All the shortcomings come to light. Those of you who were here, I was talking about it yesterday, saying that when the lamp lights up, when the light is there, you see, when I look into this light, can I see anything bad in him? No. You can see all the light. But I'm sure if you go very close to it, if you switch it off, they're full of dust. But you won't see the dust. This is how we should look into the faces of the friends. See a little bit of Baha'u'llah, and that will overlook. You can then overlook. You won't see anything else. Really, you won't see anything else. Everybody has good qualities, marvelous qualities. And one of the things that we have to learn to do is to encourage each other. It's to encourage, the local assemblies should encourage the friends. The friends should encourage their friends. Encouragement is very important for our institutions, to encourage the believers. And encouragement must be genuine. Really, if you ever come across a friend, a Baha'i who is disenchanted or who is not coming to the meetings or has got some problem, be sure that what has happened is that no one has encouraged him. He needs encouragement. I'll give you an example, a story of this. And this is a very beautiful story I heard from one of our auxiliary board members in in Britain. This woman is a teacher, and she teaches difficult children. All the rebellious type children are brought to her class. You know, children who nobody can manage them. When they come in, they really disturb everything. And she is in charge of this. In big schools, this is a problem. Often you come across children who no teacher can handle. Well, she tells us how she works with them. She said, I must find something good in them and then encourage them. That's the only way, he said, I can harness them. This is a very, very wise thing. This is how the faith has grown also. This is how Shoghi Effendi always, and Baha'u'llah and Abdul Baha encouraged something. They saw something in you which was good. And that thing they elaborated on and encouraged it. Because encouragement must be genuine. You cannot go and falsely encourage somebody and say, oh, what a wonderful person, what wonderful things you have done, without meaning it. You have to find something in that person. And she said one day, this woman told us, she said one day, a little boy was brought into my class who was a most difficult child. And he was disturbing so much that the whole class was disturbed, the whole day. And she said, I looked at him, I tried to find out what good quality I can find in him, and I couldn't. There was no good quality that she could find to praise him, or to help him, to encourage him. I remember I said to him, well, couldn't you do something? Well, send him out of this school, out of the room for a while, if he's disturbing everybody. Oh, she said, if I do that, my relationship is ruined. It's no use. I cannot do that. I must find something. And she said, when we were sitting after a while, I noticed that, all the children in school, most of them, when they sit, they stoop over their desk, they just sit down like this. They stoop and they are bending more or less. But she said, I saw that this fellow Billy is sitting straight. Now that was good enough to start him. So she said, she announced to the whole class, she said, I want all of you to look at Billy. You see how marvelous he is, how straight he sits? Now I want you all to sit like Billy. Now Billy had never heard anybody praising him. And now his eyes opened and he began to look around. He saw he became the center of attraction. Everybody looked at him. Everybody sat straight. Now, Billy becomes excited. He sits there. And he is no longer going to be difficulty. And all the children, every session when they come in, the teacher reminds them, now don't forget, you all have to sit like Billy. And what Billy does, he is so excited about it, because everything he has been doing, everybody has been attacking him more or less, of all the wrong things he's doing. Now he's going to do something else which is going to be good, so that the teacher might encourage him again. You see, this is a marvelous lesson. This is what our institutions really are doing, and will be doing, and should be doing really. And ourselves. And I think that encouragement, I'm sure some of the believers who are discouraged and who are left alone, if you find them, anybody like that, if you find what good qualities they have and try to encourage that good quality and say to them that you can serve the faith in that way through this particular ability that you have that nobody else has, we will become excited and they'll come close to us. Now, as I mentioned, this question of loving each other and not trying to judge one another is very important. Because Shoghi Effendi, in one of his writings, he mentions this. He mentions that the function of the individual in relation to another individual is to love each other and to be compassionate and to be loving, but not to judge. Whereas he says the function of the institutions of the faith, the function of the local assemblies and the National Assembly, is to apply justice. And when you apply justice, you cannot become compassionate. And Shoghi Effendi says at the present time it's the reverse. The individual Baha'is, when they come together, they judge each other and they act towards each other as if one is a local assembly, judging the other person and criticizing. And the local assemblies, when it comes to give, or the national assemblies, when they come to apply justice, they become compassionate. Every Baha'i has marvelous qualities, and we have to look into their faces and see those qualities of Baha'u'llah. I'll tell you another story, just to give you this. You know that sometimes there are difficulties in Baha'i communities, and there was a community in Europe, a Baha'i community, which had great personal problems, personality problems. You can never solve personality problems by expedient measures. You cannot solve them by expedient measures. And the only way you can really do it is to shower everyone with love. And anyhow, in my function, I was asked to go and see if I can help them. Well, there was a big file, which if I show you the size of it, it was as big as this, about this community, of all the problems they had with each other. Some of them even wouldn't talk to each other. If they saw each other in the streets, they would avoid each other. It was a terrible situation. And they said that it was obvious from reading these files. I decided not to read them, and at the end I said it's no good to read them. But I knew there was one man who they said he was the culprit. He was the responsible man. He really was the man who has created all this terrible entanglement and problems for years. And people had gone there, national assemblies, members, all kinds of people, board members, gone there to try to solve it, and it became always worse, to such an extent that these people had a great prejudices against the institutions of the faith. It became very difficult. Well, I went along and I met with these people, not that man who was all the cause of the difficulties, but I met with all the others, and I found that they were beautiful Baha'is. Really and truly. They were just beautiful Baha'is. You couldn't see anything bad in them. Oh, marvelous. And we talked about it individually with everybody. And then I was afraid to go and see that man. I had to go and see him anyhow. That was the problem. And I reached almost to the door of this house. Before I ring the bell, it suddenly occurred to me very clearly that I am going there with the wrong feelings. You know, because I've read some of these files, it's no good. And I knew that this man must have marvelous qualities. Now, this story of disagreement, the story of this community is such that for years and years and years this has been going on. And it could not be resolved. And this man was obviously the source of all the problem. I have no doubt about it. This was in this file. You could see that. But I decided immediately, before I rang the bell, to really purify my motive. I couldn't go like this. That he has some good qualities. Of course he has. He must have. He's a Baha'i. After all, he is a Baha'i. That's great. That's good enough. So with that feeling, I rang the bell. Now, I can tell you that he and his wife were sitting there waiting for 2 or 3 days, trembling with fear of they're going to see the angel of death, or is that what you call it? When he comes. They were frightened of what's going to happen now, you know. Well, when I looked at this face of this woman, I just looked at it just as I'm looking at your faces, and this woman almost melted. And she went running to her husband. I could hear whispering, saying to her that he's not that bad, you know. He's not that bad at all, but we were thinking about it. Anyhow, this man came and we sat down and we embraced each other and we sat down. And I thought, what a wonderful thing it is to meet another Baha'i, you know. And we talked about our experiences in the faith, of his services, what he has been. And we talked and talked about all the stories. We became so heated up with excitement. And he went in and he showed me all the years and years of service this man had, of all the photographs of the friends in the old countries, in other countries that he has been, in other things he'd done. A very learned person he was, and we talked about the faith. We went into all some of the abstruse writings of Baha'u'llah, and he said something and I said something, and it took 3 hours. We were discussing these things. We became so much enthused. And then at the end of it, I thought, now I better say nothing about his problems. And I said, well, now I better go. I decided I'll leave it for some other time. I'll come back again tomorrow. And I was going to go. And you know what he did? He grabbed me. He said, all of this problem in this town is my fault. He said, everything is my fault. I hadn't said a word. He said, I want you to do something. He said, I want you to accompany me to go to the houses of the believers. Now, these are the people he wouldn't talk to. He wouldn't see them. He wouldn't ever, ever, ever. And he said, I want to prostrate myself at their feet and beg forgiveness. I hadn't said anything to him. We never entered the subject. And you know, we did that. He came along, we went up, we knocked on the doors, and people were startled to see him coming to the door of his house. And he literally, he prostrated himself. He cried and cried and cried. And the others cried and cried and cried. And then we went to somebody else's house, and the same thing happened. And in the evening, we gathered all the friends together after 2 or 3 years. And it was a crying meeting all the time. They were crying. And ever since, they felt so united, so happy. And then the faith grew in that town. Local people became Baha'is. Now you see, and we never said a word about what this man had done. We have to really, genuinely, in our approach to people, is to see a trace of Baha'u'llah in every soul, in every face. All problems will vanish, I can assure you. This is how the faith works. This is the power that he has released for us. God, he has released this tremendous power. And this power is not for me or for you or for him. This power is for everybody. There is no exclusiveness here. Every one of us can draw from this power. Every one of us can attract him to ourselves. Well, we were talking about something different. You remember we were saying that to read the writings and to say our obligatory prayers is not sufficient unless we carry out the teachings of Baha'u'llah, obey his laws. And then to love one another. It's one of the most important teachings. And if we love one another, everything else will work out. And don't force yourself to love, but try to love. Try to see if there is any problem somewhere, to approach it in this way, that we are all, we all have to go from this life, you know this. We're not going to be here always. Every one of us will have to go. And this is not a place to enter into, these years that we are living here is not a place that we should try to judge each other and say, oh, this person is so irritating to me, or that person is so difficult. Now, here is where we have to turn to the writings and see what are the teachings of Baha'u'llah and do it for his love. He says, carry out my commandments. I'm paraphrasing the words of Baha'u'llah. Carry out my commandments for the love of my beauty. We do not carry out the teachings of Baha'u'llah because it's good for us. This is a very important point to remember. We don't carry out the teachings because, oh, if I carry out the teachings of Baha'u'llah, I am going to be wise, I'm going to be a good man, I'm going to be a very wise, a very knowledgeable man. This is not the real motive again. Although at first when you become a Baha'i, naturally you see the teachings and you say it's marvelous to become adorned with all these characteristics and beautiful things that the faith has. But when you become a deeper Baha'i, you realize that you do obey the teachings of Baha'u'llah for the love of Baha'u'llah. This is a marvelous motive because you love him. Again, remember, when you love somebody, go back to nature, go back to life. When you love somebody, and you really love somebody, and I'm talking of real love, 100% love, when you really love somebody, you will not question what your beloved wants. You just do it because you love that person. You see? This is the real motive, the real relationship. Although, when you carry out the teachings of Baha'u'llah for the love of him, yes, all those things will be yours. You will become knowledgeable, you will become wise, you will become deep, you will acquire all those qualities, but you acquire it not because you wanted it at first, for yourself, for the satisfaction of yourself, but you've done it because you love him. Just as much as you, when your beloved asks you something in your life, whom you love very much, when he asks for something or she asks for something, you do it because of him or because of her. This is a good motive. This is the real love. Today, Shoghi Effendi has told us, Baha'u'llah has told us, Abdul Baha has told us that not until we live the life in accordance with the teachings can our work of teaching become successful. This is another thing which is very important to bear in mind. Some of you have remembered that celebrated passage from Shoghi Effendi, which I haven't got it with me to read it for you, but I'm sure many of you who are familiar with it, this is a celebrated passage when he says, not by the force of numbers. Not by the force of numbers, not by a mere disposition of teachings, and not by an organized campaign of teaching, can you influence the people who are not Baha'is and bring them into the faith. I'm paraphrasing his ideas. He says, one thing and one thing alone. One thing and one thing alone. See how much emphasis he puts on it? And there is no other alternative. One thing and one thing alone, he says, which will bring people to the faith, is that each one of us act as mirrors. Mirrors. And we are always acting as mirrors, you know that. Every human being is a mirror of what is inside him. But he says we should act as mirrors which will project and reflect the teachings of Baha'u'llah in its purity, in its pure form. He says then it will influence others. And there are many stories, I'm sure you have heard many, many stories of such beautiful Baha'is who had lived this life in this way. And as they walk in the streets, they have been the center to which people turn to. Remember, Martha Ruth was one such person. I mean, wherever she went, people were attracted to her. I mean, this is part of our history, and this is not something that she was a very special human being. She was a human being. But she had an absolute connection with Baha'u'llah. She was connected fully to him. And this is what happened. And therefore she became a perfect mirror. What was in her heart reflected out in her face. And people saw that radiance and they were attracted to her. This is the way. And this is what Shoghi Effendi tells us. And this is why I said that the forces are all over the world preparing us. We can bring great numbers into the faith if we do these things. And I'm sure that your community has been really in the forefront of teaching activities. We have to learn from you. Forgive me for saying these things. Your community has been so successful in teaching. At one stage, I remember they would say that 1% of the people of this country are Baha'is. And whenever we talk about Alaska, it rings such a marvelous community, and now I can say it is. It really is. It's a very beautiful community. You cannot see yourselves, because you're sitting there. But I can see this. It's marvelous. And this is not because of us. This is because of Baha'u'llah. He has given us all this marvelous powers. Now, time is coming, Mr. Chairman, to have a little break. When is your break? Now? I want to tell you now, having said all of this so far, we have talked about growing our faith. Our faith grows. We want our faith to grow. And we talked about it yesterday in great details of the things we have to do. Not that I've said this, but what Baha'u'llah has said. Reading the writings and saying the obligatory prayers, and now we said about living the life. But there is one thing, that if we don't do it, really and really, this is real serious. If we don't do it, all these things will not be of any use. Even living the life would not bring up the result. And I will explain to you what it is next session. So, acquire greater faith. And I mentioned that there is one thing that we must do, and if we don't do it, all our efforts will not really resolve into, it will not become effective. And in order to explain this, I'm going to take you to nature again. In nature, we find that those of you who were here yesterday, I spoke a great deal about what nature can do to our understanding of the faith. But I will take you to nature, and you see that in life, if there is a man or a person who, say, eats a lot of food regularly, but he does not move. Can you imagine a person like that? Never moves. He's sleeping all the time, eating and sleeping, or staying up. What will happen to this person? This is not going to be a healthy life. He's not going to be able to live. And even if he lives, he'll be a sick man. The right way of living is to eat your food and then exercise your muscles and move around and work hard. And the harder you work, the more you are healthier. The healthier you are, you see. Now this is a basic principle of life, and exactly the same principle applies in the faith. There may be people who say, well, I will read the writings. But in fact, he may be a scholar. He may become a scholar of the faith. He reads everything. And he may be talk an awful lot as well. But he doesn't serve the faith. Doesn't do anything. That person is going to be unhealthy, going to be frustrating. The real way of life is to read the writings, to say your prayers, obligatory prayers, to live the life, to do all these things we have to do, but just as important, serve the cause of God. And the greatest service today to the cause of God is teaching. So you see now how there is a balance here, the balance comes into it. We are not going to be the people who are going to read and become carried away into the worlds of God or something like that. But we are going to do these things together. We're going to do this so that we can serve the faith. Although there are many things we can do to serve the faith, but I mentioned the greatest of all things in service to the faith is teaching. And I'll explain this to you later on, why this is that the greatest of all things is teaching. Now, serving the cause. Has been described to us from age to age, from time to time, by Baha'u'llah, by Abdul Baha, by Shoghi Effendi, and today by the House of Justice. Because every period of the faith, the time of the Bab, for instance, it was a period of itself. The greatest of the work of the Babis then was to teach the faith. That was stood in forefront of all other activities. But there were other things they had to do, as well as teaching, which was specific to that particular age. For instance, if you were a Babi at the time of the Bab, you had to teach the faith, but you also had to learn how to ride a horse, really, and to hold your sword, for instance. This was how it was done. It was a special requirement of that age. Then when Baha'u'llah came, again teaching was in the forefront of all the activities. But then Baha'u'llah said, now is the time never to use your sword, but to give your life. And that was a period of great stories of great heroism and martyrdoms during that period of Baha'u'llah and steadfastness. And then Abdul Baha's period, you could say, again teaching was in the forefront. But he said now is the time to remain steadfast in the covenant. There was a time that Abdul Baha, so much, the cause was attacked, at that time, during the ministry of Abdul Baha, by the enemies from within. These are the covenant breakers. They attacked the faith with such fierceness that if it wasn't for the fact that, as I was mentioning yesterday, the cause of God, the machinery, the covenant was so strong, and with the help of some heroes of the faith, a few who rallied around Abdul Baha like lions and protected the faith, today the faith would have been broken up. But it was because the machinery of the covenant was so strong, they couldn't do it. But during the period of Abdul Baha, the emphasis was on the steadfastness in the covenant. Abdul Baha used to send teachers all over the world to help the friends to remain steadfast in the covenant. We may not have the time to deal with this subject of the covenant, of course, we can't deal with everything, but now that was a special period again. But again, teaching stood in forefront. Now, since then Shoghi Effendi's ministry and today, the beginning of the formative age, again teaching the cause is in the forefront. But the specific task of today is the building of the institutions of the faith. Now, you cannot live in this age and do the things which belong to the other ages. You can't say, well, I'm a Baha'i, but I'm going to now learn how to ride a horse and hold a sword in my hand, as the early believers used to do. This would be out of place. But you cannot also, if you are going to be devotedly follow the teachings, we cannot stay away from building the institutions of the faith. This is our task. But teaching and building the institutions of the faith are the two major tasks that the Baha'is of this particular period are faced with. Now, I want to talk a little bit about teaching, which is really, Baha'u'llah says, the most meritorious of all things in the sight of God. It is not just one of the most meritorious. He says it's the most meritorious of all things in the sight of God. Now, why is it? And first of all, I want to mention that there is in my view, there is a great misunderstanding in the Baha'i communities about the purpose of teaching. Often people think that we teach the faith so that we may increase our numbers. This is not the main purpose of teaching. This is not the primary purpose of teaching, although other religions do that probably for this reason. But we must not be under this impression that the main purpose of teaching, I'm saying the main purpose of teaching, is not to increase our numbers. this is a secondary purpose. This will come as a result. The result of teaching is that our numbers will increase, but there is a far, far greater reason for teaching the faith. Teaching is an act of devotion to God. It's an act of devotion. Now, I will explain this to you in this way. Again, we go to nature and look at nature to see what teaching is in nature. In nature, you will find always any object which depends upon upon its life giver. Any object which depends upon its life giver. You know, there is a life giver. For instance, this earth is a life giver. This earth is the mother earth, isn't it? It is this earth which has created everything. Everything which you see on this earth has come about from this earth, So it's like the mother earth. We all are dependent upon this earth for our livelihood, for our existence. So we are dependent upon it. Now what happens is this: whenever such a thing exists, that this is the source of your life, the source of your existence, then all things will be drawn to it. Everything will be attracted to it. Every object, as you can see, is attracted to this earth. Do you notice that? Every object which comes within its gravitational pull is attracted to this earth. This is a love relationship. There is a love between the Creator and all the other things. This earth is like the Creator. Is the Creator of all. Is the source of life. And so every object which comes within its gravitational pull is attracted to it, just with the force of attraction, which is love. See? This is the law of nature. But, and therefore, the home of every object is to come down and to rest on this earth. When it rests on this earth, then you can say it has reached its destiny. It has reached its home. For instance, you see this pen in my hand. Its real place, the real place for this pen is to come down, to be attracted by this love relationship, to be attracted, and eventually rests on this earth. When it reaches on this earth, the lover and the beloved have reached to each other. You see? The lover and the beloved have reached to each other. And this is a stage of fulfillment, a stage of pleasure. Pleasure for both. The word pleasure really is, in here you can use it. It's a stage of fulfillment. Now this is a physical thing we are talking about. But as long as my hand is in here, you see my hand here? This hand becomes a barrier for this pen to come down and reach its beloved and rests on this earth. Although the force of attraction still exists, there is a force of attraction already even at this time. With my hand in the way, the earth is still want to draw this to itself. But my hand is preventing it. And this pencil now is a state of deprivation. Because its home is not here. Its home is to come down and be joined with its beloved. Is that clear, this sort of a? This is a principle of life. Exactly the same thing applies between God and man. Exactly. God is the creator of all. And again, as I was mentioning yesterday, we are not talking of the essence of God. Let us not talk of the essence of God, because we said yesterday clearly, there is no relationship between the essence of God and man. It cannot be with anything. There's no relationship whatsoever. But this is God revealed to man. There is a love relationship between the two. God loves to draw his soul to itself just as much as this earth loves to draw this pencil to itself. But men have many barriers in between. Many barriers. We all have barriers. Barriers of veils and barriers. Barriers of, for instance, prejudice is a barrier. It prevents people from recognizing and coming down and becoming united and becoming attracted to their Lord, to their God. Tradition is another barrier. People are born in a tradition and die in the same tradition. It's like being born in a prison and never see outside the prison, and then you die in the same prison. This is what most people are like today, tradition. Maybe in this country you don't have so much attachment to tradition, but there are countries in the world that I'm more familiar with where tradition plays a tremendous role. You don't do anything except what is tradition. There are other barriers. Pride is a barrier. Many barriers. Pride. You become proud of yourself and your accomplishments and your knowledge and your quality and your accomplishments. This is a barrier. Knowledge could become a barrier. Again, because it gives birth to pride. So you see, all people in the world, their soul, there is a force of attraction between them and God. Always God wants to draw them, and that force of attraction is there, but these barriers prevent them from coming and becoming united with their God. Now, the act of teaching, which only a Baha'i can do, is to remove these barriers one by one. And when the barriers are removed, what happens? All the barriers are removed, the soul is attracted to God. And he says, I believe. That moment when he says, I believe, as we were talking about it yesterday, the spirit of faith being born, is when the lover and the beloved reach each other. And this is a state of pleasure. Pleasure. Pleasure for God and pleasure for the soul. Because man and God are the opposite things. And in this life, when two opposites are reaching each other, this is a state of pleasure. It's like the North Pole and the South Pole of a magnet. They're attracted. So you see what teaching is? When you teach the faith, you bring pleasure to God. It's the most meritorious of all things. It's an act of devotion to God because you bring a soul to its God. This is the purpose of teaching. This is the main purpose of teaching. Well, of course, as a result of it, our numbers will increase. That is secondary. Then we can build the institutions of the faith. But therefore, teaching, friends, it's a spiritual act. It is not just something I'm going to teach the faith because the NSA tells me to do it, or because the counselors tell me to do it, or because the House of Justice tells me to do it. But teaching is an essential part of the life of a Baha'i. And it is something that we all will have to be engaged in. There is no question of anybody becoming, if anybody does not teach the faith, well, you'll have to think about it yourself. It's like a person who eats the food, he reads the writings, he may know a lot about the faith, he says his prayers, but he is not serving the faith. Well, you remember I was telling you about this man who eats his food and he doesn't do anything. What happens to him? Well, this will happen. We will not be excited, we will not be able to do anything in life. Teaching is not something that anybody can say, I am too busy for it, really. Except in certain exceptional cases. Very, very rarely you come across exceptional cases. There are, of course, places now that people are prevented from teaching. For instance, if you are living in the Holy Land, you don't teach the faith. But in this day and in these and all over the world, really, teaching is the most important aspect of our life. If we look upon the writings, we find that Baha'u'llah has enjoined on all to teach. I will tell you, our daily life often prevents us from really getting engaged in teaching the cause. Because we are so busy in our life, we're so busy, we have to do so many things. Even we have to do so many things for the faith that we have not time to teach the faith. And I think this is a very wrong way of approaching it. In fact, I remember some years ago, one of the National Assemblies told us in Europe that we had appointed one of the believers who was a marvelous teacher to become a board member, auxiliary board member. We appointed him as an auxiliary board member. And after a few months, the National Assembly wrote to us and said, "What have you done? You have made him an auxiliary board member. He was one of our best teachers. And now he doesn't teach the faith." Can you imagine? This is very wrong. In fact, one of the first things we say to our auxiliary board members all over now, at least I always advise them, if you want to do anything, you must be teaching the faith yourself. It's no excuse because I'm a very busy man and I must not teach the faith. Teaching the faith is for everyone. We found in our home that we're very busy, and myself and my wife, but we have to teach the faith, no matter how busy you are. You have to teach the faith. You cannot have an exception. There is no exception. This is the most important function of a Baha'i. And teaching is a personal thing. Unfortunately, things are done in the Western world very impersonally, and we have got used to the idea of teaching in an impersonal way, which will never be right. You have to teach on a personal level. We do most things in life impersonally. Have you noticed that? I don't know what life is like here. I'm not familiar with America. But I know in Europe, if you want to do anything, you won't put your name down for it. You give a box number in a newspaper so that nobody will recognize you. You know, it's impersonal. You don't say anything you want to do. You put a notice in the newspapers. You want to sell something, you want to buy something, you want to see somebody, you put a box number. Even when you want to fight with somebody, you don't fight him directly. You employ a solicitor, a lawyer, to fight for you. You see, everything is done impersonally here. But teaching has to be done personally. You have to come in contact with the soul. You have to love him. You have to then look into his eyes and love him with your heart until such time that you think he's now and then learn a lot about him to see what he believes in. And then comes a time that you can say a little bit about the faith. Now I want to also say something to you about teaching methods, because I feel again this is one of our problems. But this idea of teaching, now let me first say, this idea of teaching, every Baha'i teaches, is something that is so vital. Like every day we must eat. It's just as important as that. In the same way that we said every day we read the writings, every day we must engage somehow in teaching. And it's a daily thing. Shoghi Effendi mentions that. It's a daily thing. It's not once a month going from one town to another. It is something daily. I remember, and another important thing that I want to mention here before I give you some examples of this, is that Abdul Baha mentions this, that if we do not teach the faith, divine assistance will be cut off from us. I'm sure you've heard this. Now you realize that God is very loving to all creation. And yesterday we talked about forgiveness. You remember that? We talked about forgiveness and how God's forgiveness, what things it can do with it. And I'm sure that God forgives all the things that people do, but there are certain things which to a Baha'i he cannot do. You see, God's assistance reaches the whole of the this creation, if ever for one moment the assistance of God is cut off from people, they are not able to exist. The assistance of God reaches all creation. And God does not withhold his assistance from any human being. As long as they live, he's assisting them in whatever they do. If you go the right way, he assists you. If you go the wrong way, he'll assist you. Even the enemies of the faith are being assisted. Because God does not interfere in our actions. We have the free will. He shows us the way, yes. He sends his messengers, he shows us the way. He throws light upon our path. And he says, this is the right way to come, but it is up to you to choose it. And if you go this way, he'll help you. If you go the opposite way, he also will help you. It's like the engine in a car. The engine does not decide which way to go, but it will give you the power whichever one you decide to go. This is how God acts with us. This is how he... and now, he acts in this way. His assistance reaches all humanity. But it will not reach a Baha'i. Now imagine this, who does not teach the faith. And this is when the Baha'i becomes frustrated in his life. I become frustrated in my life. I become unhappy. Since I've become a Baha'i, I've become unhappy. Since I've become a Baha'i, I have all kinds of problems. It's the divine assistance which must come to us. And I can assure you that most of the problems that we have in our daily life or in anything we do can be and will be resolved if we become throw ourselves into the field of teaching every day. Then things will happen to us. Great things will happen. One will change. Now, I'm not saying that one should say, oh, well, I have a lot of problems in my life, so I better go and do a little bit of teaching so that my problems may be solved. But I can assure you that many of our problems will be so removed from the scene because you will be elevated into a different world. And these problems will sort themselves out. They will completely go into the background. Now teaching, which is personal thing. I was talking about somebody in one of these gatherings some years ago, and a woman came to me and she said, look, I have become worried since you have been saying these things, that we must teach the faith every day, and if we don't teach the faith, God's assistance will be stopped from us. I said, I didn't say that. It's Abdul Baha who says this. Oh yes, she said, I'm worried still. I'm still, in any case, I'm worried about it. And she said, I am a very reserved person. I can't go out and talk to the people about the faith. I feel very embarrassed. I cannot teach personally. And now she said, what shall I do? I am worried, he said. She kept on saying this. I said to her, did you say you're worried? She said, yes. I said, that's very good. Keep on worrying. That's your solution to your problems. Really, and keep on worrying. This is a very good solution. If ever we are brought to the point of worrying about something, you're going to do something about it. Do you know that? When you find in your daily life, it's the same thing. If you lose your job, or if your family has some problem and you begin to worry, then you are going to put one foot in front of the other and something will happen. Well, this lady went away and she came back again. She said, I can't rest. We'll have to do something, she said. She said, I'm very reserved. I can't talk about the faith to anyone. So eventually, after talking about it, mentioned to her that, look, you can go and even though that you say you are very shy or reserved or whatever it is, go out every day. And she said, that's a good idea. She said, I will give 1 hour a day for Baha'u'llah. And this is a marvelous example. I think we should remember that. Why not give 1 hour a day to Baha'u'llah for teaching? 2 hours a day, maybe, but the minimum. And she said, I'll spend some time shopping. I'll spend some time at home Why not give 1 hour a day to Baha'u'llah for teaching? And discipline yourself. And she said, I will go out. And she went out. She said, I'll go to a cafe. And I sit there. And she said she went to a cafe for 2 or 3 months, regularly. And the next time I saw her, she told me this. She said, it doesn't work. She said, I went there for 3 months, every day. I sat there, and many people came in the cafe and sat in front of me on the same table, shared the table. And she said, I could never bring myself to tell them anything about the faith. And she said, it doesn't work. I've given it up, she said. Now you see what happened in here, really, and this is another lesson we learn, a very marvelous lesson. You know, God, Baha'u'llah says that once you say you're a Baha'i, and once you enter the faith, he will test you. And always we are being tested, all the time. Remember that. As Baha'is, we are always tested. Now, it's not something that Baha'u'llah has invented and say, I'm going to test the Baha'is. In fact, testing. This is nothing new. This is a law of creation. This is a law of creation. Baha'u'llah mentions in his writings, God will test everything. He says, I will split a hair into 1,000 pieces. These are almost the words of Baha'u'llah. And each piece I will test. Now, test actually is a law of nature. You go to nature and you find tests. I'll give you an example of this. As long as you're sitting, nothing happens to you. But the minute you move, the air will resist you. If you go on a bicycle, have you noticed? When you're going on a bicycle, do you see how the air will resist you? This is nature. This is test. You're being tested. And the faster you go, the greater are the tests. The greater is the resistance. You see these aircrafts which are built up, which go twice the speed of sound. They go so fast that the air will resist it so much that the metal gets red hot. And they have to have a cooling machine inside to cool it off all the time, because it goes very fast. Nature will test it all the time. When Baha'u'llah says, I'll split a hair into 1,000 pieces and test it, this is true. Because if you look at the atoms, they are all the time under test. Each atom inside it goes through this cycle. Test is part of life. Every one of us are tested every day without knowing it, maybe. When you become Baha'i, especially. When you sit in a local spiritual assembly, we are tested all the time. It all depends how you look at your friend across the table. Just look at her like this. That's enough. I'm being tested. You know? You think of him in a wrong way, not with love, because Abdul Baha says the standard of consultation is love. Now, if I look at somebody when he says something and I want to hit hard at her, you know how it is? Hit hard. Saying such a thing. I'm being tested. Hit hard in my heart, I mean. You know, I hope we don't get to action, but it's no use also to cover it up and be very nice and smiling, and then you hate in your heart, or dislike in your heart. That is what matters, what's in our heart. You see how we are tested? And so I am tested. And when I am tested, I cannot progress anymore. When you cannot pass the test, but if you pass the test, do you know what will happen? In our lives, when you are a Baha'i, when you pass the test, then greater field of service you enter into it. You will get to do greater service to the faith. You will want to do that. And as soon as you enter there, your tests become greater. Just like somebody who will go faster. Just like the aircraft which goes faster. Your tests becomes greater. And this is why people who have had not the capacity to pass the test, if they are in a higher position, higher functions, higher duties, they could easily destroy their souls. It's like a person who is flying in an aircraft. You see, if I'm standing on this platform and if I fall, well, I may hurt my knee. But if I'm flying in an aircraft and fall, that's the end. So if I work in a local spiritual assembly or a national spiritual assembly and I have all these ambitions in my heart and I'm not able to do the things right and I am being always, don't pass the test, I might hurt myself a little bit. I might become irritated, I might become cause of problems, but it is not fatal. And this is why those people who were close to the center of the faith, those who were close to Baha'u'llah, like man who flies in the aircraft, or those who were close to Abdul Baha, or those who were close to Shoghi Effendi, in the world center, if they had slightest impurities in their lives, if there was any feeling of ambition in their hearts, that little ambition will be magnified and will destroy them. You see? This is the history of our faith. This is why people who are very close to the center of the faith, a little bit of ambition, they will be destroyed. There is no room for ambition in the faith. And especially those who served near the center of the faith, their criterion must have been servitude, absolute servitude, like Abdul Baha. He was safe. The purest branch was safe. The greatest holy leaf was safe because their standard of life was servitude, utter servitude and self-effacement. But the other family of Baha'u'llah, they all had ambitions. They wanted to be leaders. They wanted to be respected. They wanted to be honored. They wanted to be somebody. None of them endured and none of them could last. They all perished, destroyed themselves. They were very close to the center of the faith. But there must have been a lot of other ambitious people in the faith, locally, nationally. Well, they hurt each other and hurt themselves, but it is not necessarily going to be fatal. So you see, friends, one of the things to bear in mind is that tests come our way, always. I remember somebody said, there was a very outspoken, beautiful woman who passed away, a marvelous person who became great. She brought so many people into the faith in England. But she was outspoken and she used to say, you know, when I was not a Baha'i, I had no problems. She said, I had no problems with people. I was very happy with everybody. I had no problems. But as soon as I became a Baha'i, then problems appeared after the other, you know. And this may be in one sense true if you are not able to cope with it. If you are not able to really approach people with a loving attitude and pass the test. God always tests us. Now this woman that I was talking about, who was sitting in a cafe for 3 months, and people came in front of her and sat there, and eventually she couldn't say anything, and she said, although I trusted Baha'u'llah and relied on him, he said, go out and I will assist you. He said he didn't assist me. Now this is how we are tested. God tests us to find out how much faith we have in him. This is true. When you arise to serve the faith, you teach and nothing happens. And then you say, well, it doesn't work. So what happens really? You're losing your faith in him. This is how he tests you. And when I pointed this to her, she said, you are right. She said, I've been tested, of course. She said, it's my fault that this didn't work out. It is not Baha'u'llah's fault. It's my fault. Because I was not dedicated enough, I was not pure enough, I was not taking Baha'u'llah with me every day. It's my fault. And she said, now that you say, I'm going to sit there every day. I'm going to go every day, 1 hour a day. And I will go if it is necessary for years. I will not give it up. And if anything does not happen, it's my fault. And she went. And you know, she was telling us the story after 2 or 3 weeks. She said, a woman came along and sat in front of me. She said, I couldn't say anything, of course, to her, but she looked at my ring. And she said, what is this strange lines on your ring? Oh, she said, I became so nervous. I couldn't say a word now. She said, I was absolutely nervous. And I began to stammer. And the more I became nervous and stammering, this woman became more interested. You see? She said, what is it? Well, I think she told her very little, and she said, look, you better come in here, somebody will explain this to you. And well, I can tell you this woman is a Baha'i. And this other lady is no longer a shy, reserved person. She's one of the best teachers, you can see. She's going around and teach. You know, it's like a child who has never had a food before. You give him a little taste of it. Once he gets the taste, he likes it then. And then it becomes a habit for him. This is the way teaching is. And I feel the idea of 1 hour a day, or 2 hours a day, or 3 hours a day, whatever you like, you choose, is a marvelous idea for giving ourselves to Baha'u'llah for teaching, personal teaching. Now, it is very important that we must remember the difference between teaching and proclamation of the faith. And this is something, again, that I think in most communities that I am familiar with, we are mixing up the two. And as a result of this, we are harming rather than helping. You see, I feel that many people who hear about the faith and they don't come to follow it up is because of the unwisdom of the Baha'i teacher. We say the wrong things at the wrong time. We say too much. We kill him off in the first encounter. Really. We kill him off in the first encounter. And this happens, I believe, a great proportion of people who hear about the faith and do not come in is because of the unwisdom of the friends, of our teachers. And I will explain to you what I mean by this in practical terms. The first thing which happens is that we are so used in doing impersonal teaching that we think when I hold a public meeting in a town and I advertise it and people come there to hear about the faith, I think I'm teaching the faith there. I'm not. That is not a platform for teaching. If you begin to teach the faith there, you are going to do some harm. Now, I'm going to explain this to you, because I'm sure some of you may be surprised to hear this. Of course, when you go behind the radio, television, and the newspapers, you cannot teach the faith there. You can proclaim, you can give the message of Baha'u'llah. It's very different from teaching. To give the message of Baha'u'llah, yes, you do that. In a public meeting, in a hotel or somewhere, you hold it and you advertise it and people come there. Because people who come to the public meetings, they have never heard of the faith before. Or you must assume they have never heard of the faith before. You cannot teach a person that you do not know. That's a basic principle. But you can give him the message. That's all you can do in a public meeting, is to give him the message of Baha'u'llah, what it is. But we must not make an attempt, in my view, to teach them there. It's very different from giving a message and teaching. Very different, completely different. To give a message, yes, there's a public meeting, you are behind the radio, behind the television. There are certain things we must remember to do and certain things not to do when you are giving the message. I'm just talking about proclamation activities, like giving the message of Baha'u'llah in a public meeting. Remember, I'll tell you another story which perhaps will illustrate this. There was a man who for 10 years was telling me did not become a Baha'i. And I asked him why. What's this? He said, the first public meeting I went to, somebody was talking about spiritual things, said spiritual assembly, spiritual this, spiritual that. Several times he used the word spiritual. And he said, I thought Baha'is are spiritualists. And I didn't like spiritualists. So any time during these 10 years that people talked to me about the faith, I said, this is not for me. You see how one innocent word could get into somebody's mind in the wrong way and deprive him of coming close to the faith. Well, I'm not saying it was bad to say spiritual things, but this man got the wrong end of the stick. People who have never heard of the faith before, never heard of it before, if you give them a talk which is full of new things, it's too much. They're going to hear some things which they do not maybe understand or may do not accept. And you always remember the things that you do not accept. If you put yourself in this place, you go to a meeting somewhere, meet some people. They are going to talk about their ideology. What remains with you are the things that you do not accept. Now, say for instance, now you go out today, hold a meeting, public meeting, invite people there, and somebody stands up and talks about the faith. Innocently, very innocently. Say for instance, do it this way. Say, you know what the Baha'i faith is? It's the faith of love. We love everybody. We love each other. You do that a couple of times. People who have no spiritual background, they're going to say, these are the people that we were hearing about. You know, this laxity in their moral standards is such that they say they love each other. Now you see, you have to be very clear of what you're saying. You have to be so clear in what you're saying that it will not give people the wrong impressions, the wrong things. And therefore, we come to this conclusion that in such a talk which is given to the public, giving them the message of Baha'u'llah, not teaching them, we must be concise, we must weigh our words, we must not confuse the mind with a lot of names and histories, starting from Shiraz and the Bab and then the Sialchal and Tehran and Baha'u'llah and Adrianople and Akka and Constantinople and the house and the Abdul Baha and Shoghi Effendi and the House of Justice and the teachings and the laws. This, you're killing him. You're finished with him. You're trying to give him the message. You're not teaching him here. You're giving him the message. Now, Shoghi Effendi tells us how we should give the message. He says you should follow the example of Abdul Baha's talks in Europe and America. You read the talks of Abdul Baha in Europe and America. Do you know what it is like? It's 10 minutes, sometimes less. And if you take out it's 10 minutes talk. And what does he say? Never a controversial subject. Never a theological subject, which somebody could come and argue with you. If you ever create an arguing person who comes and argues with you when you are giving the message, then that's the end of it. We must give the faith when you give the message in a public meeting, should be so simple, and talk about something that people cannot disagree with, so that when the man leaves the hall, he will say, well, I agree with this. That's good enough. You have done a good job. Remember, you are not teaching him the faith. Look at what Abdul Baha said. He talks, I'm saying you should say Baha'i. You should say the word Baha'u'llah. But please don't use the word Abdul Baha and Shoghi Effendi and all the rest of it. You're confusing the man. Just Baha'u'llah is enough. What is the difference? And then what you can say, as Abdul Baha said, you know, if he ever wanted to say something about Baha'u'llah, he said Baha'u'llah has come in Persia. He has brought us these teachings. And many people have changed as a result of this. Their hearts have changed. They have become beautiful people. And today I want to talk to you about one of the teachings of Baha'u'llah. And that's it. And what he said, it was something that nobody could disagree with. Now, giving the message. But what we go to teach the faith there in a public meeting. You can't do that. And I feel this is one of the problems we have. One of the major problems we have